Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session. We are very excited to have you all here to join us for this exciting learning opportunity to learn more about Aardvark's HERO Phase 3 clinical trial for ARD-101. And just before we get started, I wanted to quickly run through some technical procedures. First, hopefully you can hear me. Secondly, I do want to let folks know that we are using Zoom webinar this evening, which means that as a participant, your microphone is automatically muted, your cameras are automatically off. You don't have to worry about that. As we go through the session, please feel free to ask any questions that you might have using the Q&A pod. From time to time, you'll want to take your mouse for a walk. And what I mean by that is just wiggle your mouse around so that your screensaver or sleep mode on your computer don't activate. We are recording today's session, and it will be made available probably within a week or two. And lastly, if anyone's having any technical difficulties whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send a message in the Q&A pod or send an email to me at ontariopws@gmail.com. So now that all of that is out of the way, I will introduce myself. My name is Jennifer Cohens. I'm the Executive Director with the Ontario Prader-Willi Syndrome Association, or affectionately known as OPWSA. I've been with the association since 2015, so almost 11 years now. It's an amazing community. I'm so thrilled to be a part of it. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I will pass things over to my co-host, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jen. I'm Michelle Cordero, the Operations Director of FPWR Canada, and I'm a mom to two, Noah and Julia. Julia, who has Prader-Willi syndrome, is 20 years old. My work with FPWR Canada is deeply personal and driven by our family's journey with PWS and the hope that research will lead to better treatments and brighter futures for our community. And I'm so grateful you're all here tonight.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm also going to take a moment to introduce our speakers. So tonight we are joined by Dr. Tian Li. He is the Chief Executive Officer with Aardvark Therapeutics. He has 20 years of experience as a biotechnology innovator and executive who has been integrally involved with the founding and advancement of several biopharmaceutical companies. And since 2017, Dr. Li has been the founder, CEO of Aardvark Therapeutics. His experience includes therapeutics for immunology, cardiovascular, oncology, neurology, and infectious disease indications. And Dr. Li is also an inventor and co-inventor of multiple biomedical and biotechnology innovations, licensed and assigned to several different companies for development. We are also joined by Dr. Mansi Jamin, who is the Chief Medical Officer with Aardvark Therapeutics. Dr. Jamin advances breakthrough therapies through the integration of medicine and technology, drawing from 15 years of clinical development, device development, regulatory filings, direct patient care, and scientific research. Through her expertise in stem cell therapy and endocrinology, she developed the world's first-in-human protocol using gene-edited cells in a medical device for type 1 diabetes and successfully executed 2 clinical trials in Canada. She has also led obesity-related clinical research activities, including post-bariatric surgery outcomes. Both Dr. Li and Dr. Jamin are physicians who care deeply to improve the health and quality of life of individuals with PWS, and we are so thrilled to have them. Later on in the session, we are going to be joined by Dr. Marina Ybarra, who is a pediatric endocrinologist and assistant professor at Western University. She has a focus on childhood obesity and related conditions, and she leads the Pediatric HEAL program at London Health Sciences Centre Children's Hospital. And HEAL stands for Healthy Eating, Activity, and Lifestyle. So we are thrilled to have all of them with us tonight. And here's a little look at the agenda. We are in the introduction period right now, and in a moment, I'm going to be passing the reins over to Dr. Lee and Dr. Jamin. They're going to be going through a presentation about HERO. And then following that, we'll have a panel discussion with Dr. Lee, Dr. Jamin, and Dr. Yabara, where they're going to also be responding to your questions. So without further ado, I know you'd love to hear from them directly. I'm going to pass the reins over to Dr. Lee and Dr. Jamin.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate this opportunity. As I mentioned, we'll be sharing the presentation together. If you could present, okay, great. I'll do the first few slides and defer the rest of the presentation to my very capable colleague, Dr. Matsuyaman. So the next slide, please. Aardvark's a publicly traded company, so just the usual disclaimers. Next slide, please. So this Aardvark was established in 2017. Actually, my wife and I were both co-founders of the company, and we initiated efforts into trying to elucidate this very interesting target of biology that ties in with gut-brain signaling. I'll have more to talk about this in the next few slides, but in essence, the lead product, which is what ARD-101 is, it's a small molecule oral drug that you take orally, and by taking it, it invokes gut-brain signaling that has a number of, we believe, beneficial effects, including reduction of hunger, as well as other features that we think are very important in the context of Prader-Willi. And right now, it culminates in our phase 3 trial, which is ongoing. The acronym for the trial is a HERO study, which stands for Hunger Elimination or Reduction Objective in Prader-Willi individuals. And we're very eager and happy to be initiating sites in Canada shortly. Next slide, please. Maybe just so great. So the ARD-101 tablets, as I mentioned, is an oral tablet, and it's taken twice a day. And what it does is it binds to these receptors in the gut called TAS2R. There actually are bitter taste receptors, but just to be very clear, the intent is not to taste the bitterness of the drug at all. It's taken so that it skips over the oral cavity and its contents are released in the GI tract. So you're not meant to consciously be aware that you've ingested something that is theoretically bitter in taste. And it's a gut-restricted drug, which means the vast majority of the drug actually is retained in the lumen of the gut. So when you take it by mouth and you eliminate it with number 2, and very little of it actually gets to the rest of your body. Normally, that's not a feature that you're going for in a drug, but in this case, the target of our drug is actually in the gut. And what we're doing is we're inducing the release of these gut peptide hormones, which regulate eating behavior. And maybe I can advance the slide just a little bit to see the extra bullets. All right, so what this drug does is releasing this panel of gut peptide hormones, and importantly, there is a very large nerve that connects the gut and the brain. There's actually a two-way communication, but the majority of signal is actually gut to the brain, and it's conveyed through the vagus nerve. And by activating these enteroendocrine cells, it actually amplifies the signal from gut to the brain, which turns off hunger selectively, which we think is particularly important in Prader-Willi syndrome. It also has other potential benefits as well too, which is will be reviewed in a later slide. But in summation, we are very happy to be proceeding now with this phase 3 trial. And I think Monty can actually comment on actually the age of inclusion now that's actually expanded downwards. But next slide, please. So the crux of the story here is there is a difference in both appetite and hunger. So you have two competing drives that are working simultaneously in your brain that guides how much you want to eat. Appetite is a reward-given drive. So if something is very delicious tasting, whether you like ice cream or cake, appetite is compelling you to eat that food. And that's like a positive drive. Existing obesity drugs, we believe, are very good at tamping down appetite, but they do much less with hunger. Hunger is the other side of the coin. It's the stick versus the carrot. And hunger is what you feel when you've actually fasted for a prolonged period of time. And we believe this is actually what is the driver for hyperphagia in Prader-Willi individuals. This is something that it can be demarcated with a number of different incretin hormones like ghrelin, and this is like a feeling that you're trying to satiate when you just feel very bad. And ghrelin is a biomarker that indicates hunger state, and if you have a 20-30% rise in your ghrelin level, you'd be feeling very, very hungry, like you skipped a couple meals. But in the case of Prader-Willi individuals, they often have 3, 4, 5 times normal ghrelin levels, which is a really indicative of the discomfort they must be feeling with this hunger drive. And some of the ways to delineate whether something is hunger driven versus appetite driven is whether quality of food matters as much. As you know, in the context of Prader-Willi, the individuals are not eating because they enjoy the experience, but because they're trying to satiate this negative sensation that they have. And we believe that this gut-brain signaling is very evident in reducing that sensation as well, too, which is how it's differentiated from other drugs that may be categorized as obesity medications. And ultimately, this is working through this gut-brain axis, this gut-brain communication. And the other reason why this is very important is elucidated in the next slide here. In that this gut-brain signal has more to do with your normal physiology than just reducing your hunger. It also correlates with reducing anxiety, also helps with gut motility through CCK, which is released with our drug. It also helps with preservation of lean body mass and reducing body fat percentage, and also reduces inflammation. And as you know, Prader-Willi individuals have more challenge than just hunger. There's also a observation of high anxiety, oftentimes severe constipation, higher body fat percentage, even if BMI is close to normal, and also a lot of inflammation in a number of individuals. And we think that this is all congruent to an observation that gut-brain signaling is somehow not as ideal as it should be in Prader-Willi individuals. So since our drug is amplifying this pathway, we were very enthusiastic to pursue this because we thought it was compensating with what was physiologically out of balance in Prader-Willi individuals, and it would be very mechanistically relevant. And this is why we actually initiated the program in the first place. And over time, we've gotten more confidence in the clinical applicability of this program. And I'll defer the rest of the talk to Dr. Jamin.
Thank you. And again, thank you so much for having us tonight. What I'm going to talk to you about is how do we get to our phase 3 program? What have we seen that gave us confidence to move forward? So ARD-101 was studied in individuals with PWS that are aged for phase 2, 17 years and older. And it was a 28-day study. And as you can see, hunger was measured using the HQ-CT questionnaire. So HQ, Hyperphagia Questionnaire, CT for clinical trials. And it's a questionnaire designed specifically for PWS. The HQ-CT captures basically the caregiver observed hunger and food-seeking behaviors. So on average, participants showed a reduction in hunger-related behaviors while on this treatment. And of course, this was very encouraging to us. And on the bar on the right side on the graph really shows that average change that we saw. So on average, about 8 points decrease in hyperphagia, which we thought was very encouraging and interesting for many reasons. And one of the other things that we noted was that there was an early signal for improved fat and muscle balance. Some of the other things that we found interesting was there was also anecdotes of decreased anxiety. And so a lot of these things that we learned from phase 2 help inform us on how we wanted to look at phase 3 or the trial that we're going to talk about in a moment. So again, just to show you kind of all the work we've done that led us to our phase 3 trial, we've dosed over 70 patients with ARD-101. The majority of the side effects were mild and resolved. There are no problems seen with other common PWS medications. And based on what we've seen so far through our phase 2, there are no expected risks to the liver, to the kidneys, to the immune system, and overall encouraging safety profile. So now let's get to some of the questions you may have on, which is the HERO phase 3 trial design, which I'm super excited to talk to you about. So this slide shows the overall design of the HERO phase 3. The study's enrolling individuals with Prader-Willi syndrome with hyperphagia, and the requirements here specifically in Canada right now, 13 years and older, though we absolutely plan on adding younger patients as well. There are 2 treatment groups, as you can see as well. So a total of 90 patients should be enrolled in this trial, and then 45 per arm. Just means that one group will get active study drug and the other group will get placebo. However, everyone has the opportunity to get active study drug in the open label extension. So this trial that you see on screen is 12 weeks long. And then following that, which I'll show you on the next screen, is the open label extension, where everyone has the opportunity who finishes this trial here for 12 weeks to go into OLE, open label extension, for approximately a year and get active drug. Now, some of the things that are similar from our phase 2 is the same questionnaire that's being used. So it's the HQCT9 questionnaire to evaluate really how we're affecting hunger overall and over time. So this is our open label trial design. I kind of already talked to you about this, but again, everyone will get active study drug. There is no placebo group here. It's approximately 1 year long, and we want to actually offer this, and our plan is to offer this as long as it takes to get approval. But for now, it's 1 year. And the main goal here is really to look at long-term safety, as most open label trials do, but also to continue to follow up on changes in hyperphagia, again, using the HQCT9 questionnaire. Some of the inclusion criteria here, and later on in the deck, I'll actually place a QR code that you can use that'll direct you directly to our trial on clinicaltrials.gov that has a bit more of a thorough list of inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria to participate. So again, confirmed diagnosis of PWS. You're up to be at least 13 years of age right now. Again, like I said, we're planning to go younger, and have the same caregiver at all visits. And that's just to keep consistency, both for a routine perspective for the families, but also for the trial. And then complete questionnaires and attend visits. We try to keep it as simple as possible, which I'll show you kind of the things that we did and some questions that we get. You know, we know participating in the clinical trial can feel very overwhelming for all of you, and it's a big step and it can add burden. So we worked intentionally really to make HERO as inclusive and manageable as possible. So we made sure the schedule is simple. So there's only 4 in-person clinic visits, plus 3 telehealth check-ins. The study is inclusive of all daily routines. There's no fasting. There's no skipping meals. We prioritize routine and consistency. So the same caregiver, as I mentioned, attends all visits. Trying to minimize disruptions in daily life is extremely important to us. We also recognize that travel and actually just a routine change can be a burden. So we are providing all travel and lodging. That's all covered in this trial. And then after completing the study, participants can join the OLE, as I mentioned several times, but everyone receives the investigational drug ARD-101, and that was very, very important to us because we didn't want you to be part of a trial where you didn't see the long-term benefit. And so again, everyone gets that opportunity. And our goal is really to reduce the burden for everyone participating in this trial while still importing these very important scientific questions. So let me show you kind of where we are globally. Again, this is global clinical trial. The orange actually denotes where the locations are. So outside of Canada, we're also in the US, the UK, Australia, and South Korea. And then the next slide will show you exactly where the sites are in Canada. Now I'm just going to keep this up for a moment so you can kind of take a look at. I'm really happy to see Dr. Ybarra on this call as well. We're so grateful for her participation and support, along with Dr. Ho, Dr. Huck, and Dr. Alice. We're incredibly fortunate to have such esteemed colleagues to be a part of this trial. And if there are questions, you know, this is the contact information, but actually the QR code I'm going to show you next will actually direct you directly to this information as well. So let me get that QR code up. So I will also give just a few minutes or a few seconds to take this. And if you actually use either one of these QR codes, one will take you to phase 3, one will take you to open label extension. You can find either of the trials if you just use one QR code. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that. And I'm happy to put this back up at the end of the presentation, which is shortly. Okay. So let me know if anybody needs more time in the Q&A, and then I'll pop this back up. So Before I end, I want to be very clear. This work does not happen in isolation. And from the beginning, we've worked so closely with our PWS advocacy organizations, including OPWSA and FPWR. And these partnerships help ensure we're focusing on what truly matters. And that's individuals with PWS and their families. We view patients, families, and the advocacy groups as partners and not participants. And we know participation in research adds so much to an already heavy load, and we do not take that lightly. So again, we're very, very grateful for this trust, for this time and effort this community continues to share with us. And I couldn't be more grateful to be a part of it and to bring the study forward in Canada. Just a huge thank you to all of you, and thanks for listening to us today as we talk to you about something that's very meaningful to us.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful information. I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of questions coming in. I see one question has already come in about putting up the slide with the locations again.
Yes.
And I'm assuming the Canadian locations, but if I'm incorrect, you can let me know.
I had a quick question. You said 90 participants. Is that per location?
It's total, global.
Global.
I will tell you, I wish we had unlimited, honestly, because I think it's absolutely necessary. But this is what we are essentially, and it's approximately 90. But it's what's approved at this time in order to meet kind of the clinical guidelines that we need to from a scientific perspective. But I will also say that this is a clinical trial, and what we want is to see this cross the finish line. And bring the drug available to everyone globally. And I know we were just talking about this before this presentation started, but the ultimate goal, and we won't be satisfied until everyone has the opportunity to have drug available to them in every country, regardless if we do a clinical trial there or not.
Okay. And then just one other thing, I don't think that, I think we briefly talked about it before, but the maximum age, because we talked about their children's hospitals or pediatric. So do we know that?
Yeah, so we are working with the sites individually. Each site will be able to take patients based on what they usually follow. So some have adult groups, and if I will say that for some of the sites, if you're contacting them directly or using one of the advocacy groups as well, we'll give more guidance as we are fully started in Canada, which is very soon. Very soon.
Okay.
We hope to have an announcement soon to state that we are now recruiting at all of the sites that you see on screen.
A couple of questions have come in around how do people sign up for the trial, or how do they enroll?
So right now, I'm showing you this because there's contact information listed. And since you have Dr. Ybarra coming up, maybe she'll be able to answer for her site as well, which is amazing. Or I would say that maybe there'll be larger communication sent out for you once we are active. And I think the thing is that we're protective about the time at the sites right now, just because if they're not active. Super excited about the engagement and how people want to participate, but until they're active, you really can't be contacted as a patient to participate. So, but the contact information below is the ideal way. So you have their emails as well. Some other countries that what we've offered right now, so the US and Australia, we have a group, it's almost a concierge service that allows you to connect with the sites. They'll figure out where you can go and what's the easiest route for you. And then they'll arrange a lot of the pre-screening information. And so we're waiting to get that started in Canada as well. And as soon as, again, it's happening all in parallel. So very soon that we'll make a larger announcement, and that actually may help you connect with the sites faster if you choose to use that.
Perfect. There's also a question about how will you pick participants if you get more interest than you have allotted in terms of your enrollment?
Well, I would say I'm not part of that process, right? So, and that would be very hard. I would just let everyone enter, to be honest. But that's why we have kind of some of the steps that we take. So, there's several layers to this. So, from inclusion, exclusion criteria, you have to meet all the parameters that are requested, and you've kind of seen some of them. And if you go to the website, you'll see a few more. But you have to meet those early screening questions, and then some of the labs are done. And then if you qualify based on several parameters, then you'll get scheduled in. Now, that's part of the process. How many go in? We didn't put a maximum on any site because we wanted every site to have the opportunity to enroll as many as possible. That being said, that also means that if you are interested and you want to be in the study, as soon as the site that you want to be at or can be at is available and open, I would recommend really just understanding what that schedule could look like for you, what works, and then, working with the site themselves to really understand how quickly you can get in. Because you have to also remember at the site level with the investigators, the doctors that are there, their team, it's a small team as well. So they're going to work as quickly as possible. I know that to make sure that you're seen, but again, they have to also have enough resources to be able to make sure as many patients can come in. So, but it's a full team effort, I will tell you. We're in touch with every single participant's site very, very, very closely, making sure we can do whatever we can to make this as easy and efficient as possible. So again, super grateful for working with the sites that we are.
And also, ultimately, it is a global trial. So, I mean, because we still have resource limitations when we actually have our target number of enrollment, we may have to close the study because we want to push forward for an approval of this drug. And so, we'll have opportunity for participants to enroll, but we have a probably capacity constraint in totality. So, I would encourage if there's interest, maybe to express it whenever it's feasible.
I know that prior to the session starting, we talked about this a little bit, but just for clarity for our participants' sake, with respect to age restrictions, I know we have a number of adult families on right now. And some of the sites are pediatric, like the London site. I believe currently they're looking at accepting up to the age of 21. Could you explain how an older family could participate in the trial if the closest site is only pediatric?
We are working on making sure, so right now some of the approvals are still going through and working with the sites to understand who can take kind of the 20 to 30-year-old to plus into that account. So as we have sites open, I will also share this information probably with PWSA as well as FPWR and make sure that you have that information. But again, hopefully have the global website open as well for Canada, and that'll have the information and that'll help guide you. We're still working through some of the details, but I do know that a couple of the sites have stated that they're possibly going to be able to take adult patients. So we want to make sure that that happens, but I don't want to over speak until we've confirmed that.
Okay. And then in terms of when you have the sites open and ready to enroll, it sounds like you will let myself and Michelle know, and we can help blast that information out to our members.
100%. I will be screaming it on top of the mountains when we're ready to go. We've been waiting for a while to make this happen. And so it's very soon. That's what I can say. Very soon. So just keep track of your emails.
Perfect. Since we were talking about the trial enrollment, there was a question about the open label extension. Is that open to more than 90 participants?
One of the requirements at this time is that everyone has to complete the 12-week HERO phase 3 program in order to qualify to be an open label extension. And I say at this time because that is based on regulatory guidance and acceptance. And so if we were to open it up to more patients, we will let everyone know that we would love to. It's just right now we can't because we have to finish the phase 3, but there's always a possibility.
Okay. In regards to trial sites, one person asked about Edmonton and Calgary are close to them. Can they apply to both and see which one would pick, or do they have to select just one site to apply to?
I think I think you have to do what's best for your own schedule. That's what I would say. So I think that if you contact both and one works out better, then that's the one you should go to. I think you should keep your options, but I think also just give the site some time to respond, because if there is the interest that we're seeing, it may take some time to get to all the emails or communication, and I know they're going to be working really hard to answer as many inquiries coming in.
Once a patient is on open label, it's no cost to them, correct?
Correct. Correct.
And then after the 1 year, do we know what the cost would be?
We don't, because generally in these phase 3 trials, companies, and this is just not just Aardvark, but all companies kind of work through that process to understand what the pricing could look like. And so that's usually not available this early. But as we go through open label, we go through the approvals process, then we'll have more information.
Okay. And then one question was just confirming the age is 13
Correct.
and older. And is there any information about younger ages, 6 years olds?
We are planning to go younger. That is actually soon. We have to, so the way it works is we have to place an amendment to a protocol and allow for the regulatory agencies to approve that if we do go younger. And then the ethics review boards have to also approve that. That's just the natural progression of clinical trials itself. So to make those significant changes, because it's significant. But we've already been able to go down to 10 in the US and Australia. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to do that globally, and if not even younger.
No, that's great. And then do you know the timelines for that, for that to be approved?
For the younger,
Mm.
so with amendments, because if they're some, maybe about a month usually it takes, but don't hold me to it. Just depends on where the
Yeah.
regulatory agencies are in the approval process.
Mhm.
But we would not we wouldn't make that change if we didn't think we could at least include patients in that age group.
Right. Okay.
Someone asked that they mentioned that their granddaughter can feel full but has severe food anxiety and insecurity. Would this treatment be helpful, or this drug?
So I can speak on it, and Tien has some anecdotes as well from phase 2. But I think the goal is and in phase 2 in this HERO trial, we're actually looking at anxiety changes over time, and that's because we had early signals and that actually changed in our phase 2. Not enough to show in terms of the data, but from anecdotes from the families to the investigators. And so, which is why we're following it so closely in this phase 3 program, because it's really important to us that it's not just hyperphagia, right? It's comprehensive, it's behavior, it's anxiety, there's so much involved under the hyperphagia umbrella. And so it's really important to continue to follow those, including some of the things that Tien mentioned already, which was then inflammation, the hyperinflammatory state some patients experience, or the constipation. We're following that, which we anticipate to change. We actually had decreased constipation in some of the patients who are in phase 2. And so important, and nothing that was, this was a small phase 2 study, so which is why we're following it in phase 3, because it's much larger and we'll hopefully see really positive effect. But again, we have to wait for the end.
Yeah, I'm very optimistic that the anti-anxiety effect of the drug will become evident, and that's actually why it's a formal exploratory endpoint for our phase 3, and it's really consistent with what we think this mechanism should help with, right? So that's one of the key findings that we're hoping to elucidate.
I guess on that note, another person had asked, can you describe how hyperphagia has decreased in, I guess, in phase 2 trial, and what behaviors you're seeing, or what anecdotally you're hearing from parents, I guess.
Okay, I'll show this slide again as well. And Tien, do you want to start? I can.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've gotten many anecdotes about patients, families noting their Prader-Willi family member was leaving food on the plate, feeling satisfied without even having the complete meal. Even a couple patients anecdotes that I'm aware of that meal times were completely skipped inadvertently because the individual just forgot to eat and everyone forgot to serve lunch, and everyone was mortified mid-afternoon that lunch hadn't been served, but there was really no complaint, which is really a remarkable um, finding, and this is adding to our encouragement that we have high expectations for this phase 3.
Yeah. And so again, some of the things that like that in terms of categories, it's food seeking, it's food asking, the number of times asking for food, the number of times trying to find food, that changed. And again, preliminary. So I don't want to speak on what we expect for phase 3, but I don't expect anything different. And hopefully that it is amplified, as Tian mentioned.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's music to a lot of families' ears right now.
It is.
Are there any fears or of negative interactions with any other drugs or SSR medications? Like, would someone be eligible to participate in the trial if they are on SSR medications or things like that?
Yes, you're as long as it's stable dosing. We don't want, drastic changes in dosing. We want you to be on a stable dose as you enter a trial, and mostly because we want to keep everything else the same so we can truly see the change that you're having based on the one drug that we're giving you versus all the things in your background. Background stays the same, so there's no other background noise, essentially, if you have multiple changes in medications. So it really truly allows us to see the signal from the drug itself versus other things that might be changing. Now, there would be medications that you change based on what's allowed for that medication change, but I'm thinking about like, half the dose, or if you go on a new medication while like a month before you plan to be in the study, that's harder just because we have that as an exclusion that, really need to have some of the medication stable. But we don't anticipate any interaction with these drugs. Again, and I think it's because our unique mechanism of action that Tian mentioned, because it's gut restricted, gut mediated. We like to call it poop kinetics, or Tian likes to call it poop kinetics, but it's true because it's mostly excreted through your poop. And that's really important. So that allows us to see the encouraging safety profile we have.
Yeah, I can't say anything better than Monty has already stated, but just wanted to add one more observation. Most of the time when you're worried about drug interactions, it's because a drug might compete with another drug for how it's eliminated from the body and so forth. And liver and kidney are one of they're usually the organs that help excrete and metabolize drugs. But our drug is really mostly retained in the gut, and because of that, that kind of avoids interactions with other drugs. So we're very encouraged that this will be very compatible.
Perfect. There was a question about, I think phase 2 was, I'm assuming this is in reference to that, what the age group was that was tested, and I think it was 17.
Correct. 17 and older. Correct.
And there's also a couple of questions in regards to side effects. One was whether there was any side effects for the kidney, and the other was just, what were any adverse events that happened in phase 2, and yeah.
Okay. So as Tian already mentioned, so because it's not metabolized by the liver or the kidney, and because most of it is gut restricted, it actually doesn't make it into the systemic circulation in large quantities to affect the kidney. Again, it doesn't even go through the kidneys to be metabolized. So so far, no kidney side effects noted. And then in terms of sorry, what was the second question?
Adverse reaction or adverse
for the phase 2.
situations
Great.
from
So
phase
that's
2.
a great question and important to know, because I think also as you're planning to participate in any clinical trial, you want to know this data. And so it was a 28-day study. It was for 17 years and older. And the patients that participated, especially, there were two parts to our study. One was at a lower dose, and one was at the dose that we're using for phase three. So, or the part two of the phase two design is probably the most relevant. And so there were diarrhea was one of them. And actually, this is why that led us to look at stool in phase three, because we were like, wow, that's interesting, because obviously it's opposite of what's usually within this population, right? More constipation versus diarrhea, which also resolved. Nothing was actually, everything was considered mild. So in clinical trials, it's mild, moderate, severe in terms of how they look at adverse responses. And for our study in phase two, it was all mild, and resolved within a day, 2 days. So diarrhea, there was some irritability, but that was actually associated with something happening in the background. But because they were in the clinical trial, it was something personal that was happening in the background. It was noted in the trial. And then those are the two major ones. I think there was a headache for one day as well. But it's very minimal, and which is why I think we're so encouraged, because we didn't see this huge variation on things that we would be concerned about, that would involve the systemic circulation. So, and I know that people have, like, kind of, if you're asking questions about adverse events or side effects, you probably know what's out there already, and side effects associated with other drugs, but we haven't seen any in ours.
Wonderful.
There's a couple questions about if they're currently enrolled in a clinical trial, do they need to wait for a gap like in between trials to qualify?
Yes, yes. So for clinical trials specifically, if it's an investigational drug that or therapy, you're on at least a month before you go into a screening visit. And that's very important, just because we don't want any residual effects of whatever clinical trial you're on to affect the outcome of this trial. And that's also very standard.
Would that include like behavioral related trials? Like I know there's a few different behavioral trials going on right now.
Yes, yes. And also because the questionnaire we use is so heavily based on behavioral changes that we really need an established baseline without interference with another trial, to truly understand if there was a change in the behavior secondary to our investigational drug versus if there's some noise from another drug or therapy.
If an individual is unable to swallow pills, is there a protocol for them?
So one of the requirements is to be able to swallow pills, because it's an oral drug. But I know, so far we've had, and our sites are incredible. They already have tools in place to help their families figure out unique ways to get them to have a pill. If they can't swallow well, then what are the techniques that can be used? We're working with them, but they usually don't need our help, to be honest. They already know, like, we know this population, and they need to or swallow something, then we know how to do it. Like, an example is that putting a little bit of applesauce or a puree on a spoon, but we don't want it to be bit, like, you don't want to bite the drug, right? Because one of the things, it's a bitter taste receptor. So you don't want to bite the drug, but you want to be able to swallow it. And so putting something soft to be able to swallow quickly is a great method. But we learned this from our sites. And it's like I said, I learned more from you guys than I teach.
And also, the tablets are relatively modest in size. They're four 200 milligram tablets, is approximately the size of an Advil, or an M&M. So it's smaller than many pills.
There's a question about if a parent is participating at a Canadian trial site, what happens if the drug is approved in the US?
You mean
And
if they're an open label extension and then it's approved
I
in the
think
US?
so, but
Or?
also maybe you could just quickly touch on I know this isn't a Canadian regulatory pathway call, but touch on how, any drug approval in the US, whether that impacts Health Canada approvals or not, or how that looks.
Generally, it's always a positive, right, that you have an approval. And so an approval also means that you had enough data to show that it was effective and safe. And there's some other requirements around it. So I don't think it's a negative to have an approval. Often can be a positive to allow approvals in other countries as well. So I think that if hopefully we do get an approval in the US, and that'll expedite us to move forward in other countries.
Right. And if I guess you wouldn't seek FDA approval until after phase 3 is completed.
Correct. So there's generally for clinical trials, we have a good relationship and interaction with health authorities because they know what they're doing. They also know what's been done. And so we're working with them to ensure that we provide the adequate data that's required to show efficacy and the drug is effective as well as it's safe for the population being studied. And so I think that's phase 3 is usually after phase 3 is completed is usually when you connect with the agencies to see where you are and if there's adequate data and positive data that will help us move towards approvals. But we're anticipating to do so, hopefully.
And just to circle back, so if someone were in the open label extension, and let's say the drug was approved in the US and that person was in the open label extension in Canada, would they still be able to get that open label extension drug in the meantime?
Yes, we won't stop the study if the open label has continued for as long as it has. That's not something that either Tia and I want to do.
Perfect. And would this medication or drug work with PWS if the individual has Crohn's as well, or have you studied that at all or had any issue with that?
Yeah, so because it's a gut-mediated hormone, it would just depend how much of the gut lining has been affected by Crohn's and where. Right, I mean, for the clinical trial, there are some exceptions on who can participate if they've had major abdominal surgeries. You can imagine we need to know how it's affecting through the gut. Down the line, long term, it would all just depend on where the gut's been affected for these individuals.
And just anecdotally, I just want to say that, when we actually interrogated this pathway, one of the key effects of our drug seemed to be anti-inflammatory effects, and Crohn's is a disease of gut inflammation. So we actually have reason to think that if it were compatible, it might have actually secondary benefit potentially based on the mechanism of the drug. So I wouldn't out of pocket preclude enrollment because of some condition like that. That's subject to the protocol and the PIs.
I know we're getting close to our hour, so I wanted to ask Dr. Ybarra, was there anything that you wanted to add?
Thank you, Jennifer. No, I want to just say that hopefully we're expected to be the first site in Canada to start enrolling or screening, and we're really hopeful that that would happen by the end of January. So we are very excited about this. And as a pediatric site, I'm hoping I could extend to see patients up to 21 years old. Maybe we can think about extending a little bit further on, as Prader-Willi syndrome patients do have a cognitive level a little bit lower than an adult. So maybe I still feel comfortable in seeing a little bit older, but I don't think that older than 25 I'll be comfortable to see. So at least patients up to 25, I think we can pre-screen and screen and start enrolling in Ontario.
Super
Thank you.
excited about that. Thank you, Dr. Ibarra.
There is a question, I think we've somewhat addressed it, but just to reiterate it, about covering flights and hotel if someone's coming from a neighboring province or traveling to another site.
All travel and lodging is covered. We want to make sure this is as burdenless as possible. And so we actually are working with a specific group that will coordinate everything for you.
Perfect. There was a question about why is the minimum age requirement currently higher for this drug?
We actually had 13 and older across the globe. And as we have been able to work with specific regulatory agencies, we've been able to go down in the age per country, not even as a global. We always wanted to go younger, but we were only able to do it in this stepwise approach. But again, like I said, we are committed to going across the globe the same age. So hopefully we'll be able to announce that soon as well.
Just with regards to the age, and then we were talking about, people having trouble swallowing pills, and younger kids typically do. Is there any plans for a liquid version? That was one of the questions for the future.
It's a little difficult functionally for liquid version because it's hard to mask the taste that way, right? So we want to make sure that it bypasses the oral cavity. Not to say that there's not a workaround, but that's probably a next generation development that we have. We had actually contemplated that as well too, but there's some logistical challenges in having a liquid formulation for this particular medication.
Can you briefly describe the taste if we were to actually be able to?
Yeah, it is substantially orders of magnitude more bitter than a bitter coffee, right? So it's very, very strong. I mean, it wouldn't convey harm by tasting it, but it would be a kind of an unforgettable experience, right? So,
Yeah.
Unpleasant and
Yeah,
unforgettable.
I was thinking.
We just encourage that don't try to even try
No,
for many
agree.
reasons, not just because it's unpleasant, but also just for the clinical trial itself. So you're right, there may be swallowing issues, but again, I think the size of the pill itself is as Etienne mentioned about the size of like an ibuprofen or a small M&M. So it's just for the size wise, I think we did what we could. But it doesn't mean that we won't try to iterate. It's just not anytime soon.
There's a question. I know this parent has their child in a group home. So the individual with PWS, it sounds like the person that's taking them for visits will have to complete some questionnaires. So essentially, even if the person's with a group home, they have to guarantee that it's the same staff that would be taking them to these appointments to fill out the questionnaires just to make sure that responses are consistent or
Correct. And we also actually put in flexibility here as well because we understand that the staff member may not be there 7 days a week. But as long as the staff member is there, and it's outlined in the protocol, but as long as the staff member there is a majority of the time with them, waking hours, on average, there's certain language we place to allow per week that can truly assess the baseline of where the patient was and then how it's changed over time during the clinical trial, and that same staff member is there, then that's where we found the flexibility. So certainly it doesn't have to be 7 days a week, but it has to be a majority of some of the time there.
Thank you. And I know we talked a little bit about other medications as well, but there was a specific question around whether someone taking medications for anxiety or ADHD would be able to be on this drug.
So they are allowed. Again, it's medication specific, but in general, most medications under those two categories are allowed as long as it's stable and there haven't been major changes up to 3 months before screening visit.
Great. And there's a question just going back to the pill format. There's a question about whether the pill could be crushed for easier digestion.
No, that is actually against the protocol as well. And again, for many of the reasons we already discussed, you probably don't want to do that, but also it's against the protocol requirements. So you must be able to swallow, cannot be crushed, cannot be bitten. It needs to be fully swallowed in whole.
And Dr. Ybarra, there was a plug from a family in London to consider older people with PWS in London. And you know, if you're interested in getting a list of potential people as a possibility for future, if they can submit their names for like a waiting list or something like that.
Sure, sure. I did email both Mansi and Jennifer the contact email for London site because it wasn't in your list.
Yeah.
I apologize about that. So her name is Rhiannon Ricks, and she's the clinical coordinator at the Children's Hospital, and she will be taking all emails and making a list of people who are interested for our site.
Okay,
Great.
perfect.
We will update that as well. Thank you.
Perhaps when we send out the link to the recording, we'll send an email to all attendees with the link to the recording. We can add in the contact details for your site. Michelle, did you have any other questions you wanted to ask before we wrap up?
There was one sort of last question here about being on Ozempic. Is that
Oh, that's not allowed in the trial. Again, because we're also wanting to minimize kind of the effects on hunger.
so any GLP-1, not just
Any
Ozempic then?
GLP-1,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lee, Dr. Jamin, and Dr. Ybarra for joining us. We are so thrilled about having this trial come to Canada. And I know everyone's going to be eagerly awaiting hearing more details about when the sites are open. But thank you so much for sharing with our community tonight.
Thank you for having us. Again, so grateful for this truly collaborative partnership that we have here. And we're here to support and grateful for the families and their patients and the participants. It's incredible to be a part of this community and to work towards this and can't wait for sites to start enrolling.
I can't wait to start screening
That's
too.
to say, we can't wait either. We
Every day
appreciate
think
your
about this a
time.
lot. Yeah, every day we think about this, so we're trying to get everything done as soon as we can. So we can only imagine what it's like, and we're very eager to see through to the end of this.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much. And again, to the participants, we will send an email with a link to where you can access the recording, as well as details about connecting with the trial sites. But thank you again for participating, and thank you to our amazing presenters. And thanks, Michelle. Michelle, do you have any final words?
No, we're good. I think we covered everything. This has been fantastic.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.